So how many times have you heard or even said yourself when somebody is talking, you yourself saying this or somebody else saying this, yeah, without even actually listening to what the other person is saying? Or even as we've talked about and seen, people even saying in the same sentence, yeah, no, yeah, no, to who knows what that they're answering to and affirming without even giving it any thought of what they're actually saying, just for the sake of getting through the awkward moment or somehow thinking that they're accomplishing something by saying these things. And while that might not be your habit, or maybe you've never done it yourself, I think most people have heard that. Somebody's quick to say yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, without even listening to what the proposition is that they're even answering to. How about this one? No, really, I promise. Maybe you've heard that one. How about this one? Swear to God. Have you heard that one or said that one? How about this one as a kid? Maybe it's just an American thing, I'm not sure, but there's a little kid's rhyme that ends up with saying something like stick a needle in my eye if I'm not telling the truth. How about the pinky swear? Has anybody ever heard of the pinky swear? How about this one that we see all the time? Well, you actually need to read the small print. Or how about this one? For sure. Or I'll be there. And so today's society has been held together by a system of lies. And truth threatens the system of lies. Therefore, it is hated. Therefore, the truth is hated because the system relies on lies. The natural man will follow his father, Satan, the father of lies. John 8:44. And with this whole dilemma of falsehood in this world that we live in the human nature, oaths have come forward. Because of the human depravity of not telling the truth or not being truthful, this whole concept of oaths had to come forward. And oaths have been used to force a liar to be truthful in certain circumstances. In other words, oaths kind of back people into a corner and force them to tell the truth by calling this thing an oath or a promise. And we're going to talk about that. Oaths have also been used to create loopholes against accountability to be truthful. In other words, oaths have been used to cover up lies. If you create an elaborate oath, you can somehow, somebody would agree to, you can somehow wiggle your way out of it if you've made it so complicated, like having fine print attached, that you could somehow use an oath to wiggle out of something. Oaths prove that the natural man knows he's depraved and that people will lie unless they are somehow restrained. People will naturally lie unless something forces them to be truthful. And with this, oaths prove that man cannot be trusted. So we see it, we're in the book of James, we're in chapter 5, and we're going to see in this passage this morning, James chapter 5, verse 12, that it shows two types of promises that will help you to speak as a Christian and avoid judgment. So we're going to be in just one verse today, James 5:12. James 5:12. But above all, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath, but your yes is to be yes and your no, no, so that you may not fall into judgment. And so we're going to see that this passage shows two types of promises that will help you to speak as a Christian and avoid judgment. So we have the two types of promises. And the first one is what we see here, are what we call polluted promises. But above all, my brother, do not swear by either heaven or by earth or with any other oath. And James is once again reminding that he's speaking to Christians. He's saying, my brother. And he says that Christians are not to swear by certain oaths. He lists a few of them, which we would then call, as we will see, polluted promises. And we see in the word swear, in this context, it does not mean to curse or to cuss or to tell dirty jokes or other unwholesome speech. Instead, what swear means is to affirm veracity of one's statement by invoking a transcendent entity, frequently with an implied invitation of punishment if one is untruthful. I know that's a lot. That's the official from the lexicon of what this word means in the Greek. And what it basically means is to swear by something. You're adding basically almost collateral to your statement of trying to make you seem to be more valid in what you're saying by saying something like, and if I'm wrong, may lightning strike me. And these include all these things that we talked about earlier. But if I'm wrong, and these are things that people swear in this way to make it sound like their yes it is really yes, or their no is really no. These are things that they're kind of added ingredients to try to make them sound more truthful. An oath means then, so that's what swearing means. An oath means a solemn promise, vow, or pledge. That's an oath. And with this, oaths in general are not necessarily bad or prohibited. In general, they're not necessarily bad or prohibited. But as we'll see, certain types of oaths are prohibited. And this is what James is talking about, and we'll see that this is what Jesus has talked about, and we'll see that the whole Bible is given examples of these things. And we're going to see this. Oaths were used and even recommended by God in many circumstances. So oaths themselves are not necessarily bad. We're going to talk about that for a minute. God's oaths were that of promised blessings. We see throughout Scripture, he makes us promises, he makes oaths. Genesis 22:16, we see that he did that with Abraham, and we see Exodus 32, and we see Amos 6:8, and Hebrews 6:13, and we're seeing these things. God's oaths, some of them included that his promises of wrath. He's made oaths that I'm serious here, and you need to believe me, there will be wrath pouring out on these situations here and on these people. Get this part. God gave oaths to the naturally unbelieving Abraham as he had not yet known God and his faithfulness. See, God gave Abraham. Abraham was not a man that knew God until God came to Abraham. He didn't know God. God gave Abraham an oath because at that point, Abraham didn't have faith in God. And so God, recognizing that he didn't have faith, he made an oath with him because Abraham needed, according to what God demonstrated that he needed, it was an oath to trust God. And we saw this. We see that Jesus spoke under oath at his trial in Matthew 26, the same chapter we talked about earlier, before on the night of his betrayal. Paul took oaths. We see that. Paul took oaths, Romans 1:9, 2 Corinthians 1:23, 1 Thessalonians 2:10. Oaths were designed by God for instances where a party could not be initially trusted by the other party. And this was even in Exodus 22:10. Oaths were created to help with one party that doesn't necessarily initially trust the other party. Therefore, an oath was put in place to help somebody to believe that this would actually come true. That's what this is all about. But Christians should be trustworthy among each other. Christians should be trustworthy among each other. We should not have to make an oath with one another. We should be able to be trusted. We should be able to be trusted by one another. And this is Paul wrote this in 2 Corinthians 1:15 to all the way through chapter 2, verse 14. But with this, then, oaths had become a tool of liars among Israel. It had become a tool of liars among Israel, just as it has done today. Israel had made oaths to the Lord and vows to the Lord. It's true. But then, as they were making vows and oaths with each other, they began to invoke the name of the Lord to solidify their oaths to one another. This was supposedly by saying, as they were to say, "Oh, I swear to God," or Yahweh. It was supposedly to invite punishment to themselves if they were untrue. In other words, they were being very daring by saying, "Look, I'm invoking, if I'm not telling you the truth, I'm inviting God to strike me with lightning," basically. And so their oaths and their vows sounded very tempting to believe because they invoked the name of God. But in reality, Exodus 27 says that we're not supposed to use the Lord's name in vain. We're not supposed to use the Lord's name in vain. And so what they did is the Jews decided to come up with an idea to make loopholes of the truth by invoking religious things to their vows. And Jesus talked about that. We'll see this in a minute. In other words, maybe they wouldn't use the name of God, but they would use other religious terms to make it sound like they were really intended to keep their promises. And so Jesus spoke on this issue. So what we're getting at, and I'm going to read this, that this was going on at James' time, Jesus' time, and this is still going on today. This is what Jesus says. "Again, you have heard that the ancients were told, 'You shall not make false vows, but you shall fulfill your vows to the Lord.' But I say to you," this is Jesus speaking, "make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one white or black. Let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond this is evil." This is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5:33 to 37. He also talks about it in chapter 26. And he was saying, "Oh, we're just using the temple as part of the vow." Jesus is saying the temple belongs to God. You're trying to find loopholes and you're trying to use God, but in reality, you're acting evil. Now we see, I'm going to give you some examples, and so put on your seatbelts for this, because they're going to sound familiar, some of them, unfortunately. The Bible gives examples of polluted promises, or what we would call sinful oaths, the same examples that we see today. So we're going to see this, and we're going to be rattled by some of these things because they do rattle us. The Bible hurts sometimes. First, we're going to see the false oath. The false oath. This is entering into a vow with no intention of keeping it. You plan it, you plot it, you make a promise that you have no intention of keeping. Jesus says this, "Let none of you devise evil in your heart against another, and do not love perjury, for all these are what I hate, declares the Lord." And this is from Zechariah 8:17, and Jesus declaring it in Matthew 5:33. And the false oath means basically this: I can get away with this. It's only a little lie, and it really won't hurt anyone. It's basically a conspiracy between the three of you, me, myself, and I, to do something evil ahead of time and lie. That's the false oath. Okay, you're thinking this ahead of time, you're planning it ahead of time, you're plotting it. Then there's the rash oath. The rash oath. This is rushing into a commitment without thought and prayer. And keep in mind what we read in our scripture earlier with Peter and those other disciples that were just like him. Leviticus 15:4 says, "If a person swears thoughtlessly with his lips to do evil or to do good, in whatever matter a man may speak thoughtlessly with an oath, and it is hidden from him, and then he comes to know he will be guilty in one of these." In other words, You are still going to be held accountable whether you didn't know it or not. If you thoughtlessly entered into an oath and you didn't know because you didn't think about it and you didn't pray about it, there's a whole bunch of situations in life that we know. If we hear shots fired, we're going to duck. If we hear shots fired, I'm going to say to you, duck. But when there's situations where you can think about it and situations that you can pray about it, you need to do that so that you don't make a rash oath. And we're going to see this. This happened to our hero Joshua that we see in the Bible. We love Joshua. He never did anything wrong that we see, except for Joshua 9. And Joshua is a hero, and this could never happen to this guy Joshua, but this is what happened. It happened to Joshua. He was commanded by God to enter the promised land, taking up the helm after Moses, and he was commanded to put to death all of those living within the boundaries of Canaan, because God had determined that they were wicked and that he wanted them all put to death, men, women, and children, and then the Jews were going to go in and take over. They were to not make covenants, be friendly. They were not to do anything with anybody within that boundary. He was commanded to wipe them out. But Joshua was duped. He was tricked because there was a group that came that heard about what Joshua was up to, what Israel was up to. A group got themselves all dirty and poor and hungry looking and with stale bread and everything else, and they traveled. They lived within the boundaries. They heard what was going to happen. They traveled, and they said, we heard about you guys, and we live outside of this boundary over here, the boundary, and we want to make a covenant with you because we want to be your friends. And we live outside of the boundaries. Joshua made a covenant with them because he didn't first consult the Lord. He's the military leader, not just the military, just the leader of Israel, and he got duped. He got duped. He made a rash decision. And this violates the principle, which we know this proverb. Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. He was doing the Lord's work, and he made a rash covenant. He made a rash oath. He made a rash promise, a rash vow. And now this rash oath that he made caused major problems for Israel, because now the promised land was contaminated. And when it's contaminated, it's contaminated. Joshua got duped. He messed up. Proverbs 20:23 says, it's a trap for a man to say rashly, it is holy, and after the vow, then make inquiry. In other words, that's what Joshua did. He just basically said, we'll preserve this group, but he didn't check into it. And look what happened. It was rash. That's the rash oath. The rash oath is, let's just do this so we can make this situation just go away real quick. Supposedly. Does this thing sound familiar? Then we have the foolish oath. The foolish oath is seen in the conflict between John the Baptist and King Herod. Matthew 14, 1 through 12, and also Mark 6:26 talks about this. King Herod had John the Baptist put in prison because John the Baptist was telling the truth and pointing out to King Herod that he's not supposed to be stealing his brother's wife. King Herod was not supposed to take his brother's wife Herodias and make her his wife. And so King Herod didn't like that, so he put John the Baptist in prison. Verse 16 of that passage. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod, so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Having been prompted by her mother, this young lady Herodias, she said, after being prompted by her mother, she says this to King Herod, who says, whatever you want. She says this, give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist. Although he was grieved, the king commanded it to be given because of his oath and because of his dinner guests. He sent and had John beheaded in prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. That is a foolish oath. That's the example of a foolish oath. I can get what I want for the moment. I could look cool in front of my friends, and no one will really call me on it, supposedly. These different reasoning for the foolish oath that we see today. Maybe this one's familiar. The blasphemous bargaining oath. This is trying to make a deal with the Almighty God. Trying to make a deal with the Almighty God. This is seen in the story of Jephthah. He was the 9th judge of Israel before they had kings. This is the book of Judges. Judges chapter 11. You can read the whole thing. In attempting military victory, Jephthah made this blasphemous bargaining oath with God. Listen to this. Verse 30. Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said this: if you will indeed give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the sons of Ammon, it shall be the Lord's. And I will offer it up as a burnt offering. And he was victorious in battle. Verse 34. When Jephthah came to his house at Mizpah, behold, his daughter was coming out to meet him with tambourines and with dancing. Now she was his one and only child. Beside her, he had no son or daughter. Verse 39. He did to her according to the vow which he had made. This is the blasphemous bargaining oath. See if this sounds familiar. If you get me out of this one, God, I promise to go to church every Sunday. We've heard this. And it's as if you can make bargains with God. And you can make these promises to God that you're going to do these things so that you can think that you can get what you want from God. This is the blasphemous bargaining oath. Then we see in the Bible and in life the frantic oath. This is a knee-jerk reaction when fear takes over. The knee-jerk reaction when fear takes over is the frantic oath. On the night of Jesus' arrest, we know what he was saying that afternoon. We heard it earlier. But him and the guys were making what we will see as a prideful oath. Him and the guys, oh, I will die for you, Jesus. Oh, yes. Oh, well, Peter says he's going to die, and he's the number one guy. We can't let him have more credit than us. So we're all going to say, yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. We're going to die with you too. And on the night of his arrest, Peter denied knowing Christ. So he made a prideful oath, and now he makes a frantic oath. Verse 74 of Matthew 26. Then he began to curse and swear, I do not know the man. And immediately a rooster crowed. So first he makes a prideful oath, and all the other guys do too, because since he did it, we have to do it now. And now he makes a frantic oath, I swear I don't know this guy. I mean, he's all over the place. And immediately a rooster crowed. That's the frantic oath. And it occurs when faith is weak. Sound familiar? So we're going to talk about this from the prideful oath. This is making an oath to enhance popularity and position, just like Peter and the guys did before they crashed and burned, because they all scattered. This is what happened also to Ananias and Sapphira, Acts chapter 5, verse 1 through 11. Ananias and Sapphira, the early church, everybody was bringing in gifts, and they had to top it. They made a promise that they were going to sell some property and that they would deliver all the proceeds to the church, because they had to look like all the rest of them who were bringing gifts to the church. So they bragged that they would give all the proceeds of the sale of some property to the local church, but they were called out by the apostles. They were called out by the apostles. And when they were called out by the apostles, verse 5, first Ananias, when he heard these words, he fell down and breathed his last. He was taken out. Verse 9, his wife, Sapphira, stuck to the story when she was confronted, and immediately she fell at his feet and breathed her last. So the prideful oath occurs when there is no fear of God, but instead confidence in self. The prideful oath means I can do this, I can back this up, I can handle this, I can do this, without even acknowledging God and not even fearing God and popping off, thinking that you're all that and that you can make these promises. That's the prideful oath. Then we see the religious oath. We see the religious oath. This is seen in the wicked wanting to appear religious. In the wicked that want to appear religious. And the example here we see in the harlot of Proverbs chapter 7. And she was luring the young man by making herself look religious. I'm really a nice girl. This is what she says, Proverbs 7:14. I was due to offer peace offerings today, and today I have paid my vows. Therefore I've come out to meet you. Oh, she's a nice girl. She appears to be religious, but yet what she's doing is it says that her husband's out of town and that she's an adulteress, but she's making vows even at church or anywhere else to appear to be like she's actually one of the Christians that can be trusted. And so we see that this religious oath is seen everywhere with those that want to play church, yet really deny Christ. And this is the whole works mentality of false religions, of just do this and you'll look religious, just do this, just say this, just go along with this, make this vow, make this so that you could look religious and you will get credit by those that think that you're religious. And these are just some of the examples of the evil oaths that Christians are to avoid. And that we probably, all of us, have somehow been involved in one of these oaths, or even all of them. It's just the reality, because we're fallen. Christians, therefore, are commanded to reject this system of oaths in dealing with each other. We are to reject the evil system of oaths in dealing with each other. Bottom line is, the tongue reveals that which is in the heart, Matthew 12:34, and the wicked heart will be tempted to make polluted promises. So when these things come out of your mouth, it really shows that maybe you're frantic and you're operating on fear. Maybe you're prideful and you're operating on self. Maybe you're rash because you're impatient. These things show faults in your heart that you need to deal with. Now we're going to see the opposite of these polluted promises, plain promises. The second half of verse 12. But your yes is to be yes, and your no, no, so that you may not fall under judgment. But your yes is to be yes, and your no, no. And the Christian, therefore, is to live by faith. And therefore, with this, most of these oaths that we saw, or all of the oaths that we just saw, are actually the opposite of faith. Frantic is weak faith. Rash is that you're not trusting God. Foolish is you're not paying attention to God. All these different things are the opposite of having strong faith. And even in a pinch, during suffering, a Christian is still supposed to respond with faith, not thoughtless oaths. And so our faith leaves this room, and our faith is to leave our prayer and reading time in the morning and actually go out in our whole day. That's what our faith is supposed to do, because these things have to do with false oaths that have to do with us and the whole world. And other people that think that we say we're Christians, but yet then we do these things and they just look at us like, well, they obviously don't have any faith. And even an unbeliever can see some of these things in our lives. We have to be careful. Interestingly, though, James sandwiched this section between his answers for the Christians wanting quick relief from suffering. So, false oaths have somehow got us quick relief, supposedly, from suffering or from a dilemma that we just want to get rid of. And he has sandwiched this passage in between two ways that we can deal with suffering without panicking or without doing these false things. Interesting. Last week, we talked about the Christian's response to scenarios in life with patience. That's a way to help us. That's a way to help us. And my brother, Fred Rose, who I will quote because for the world to hear, such a blessing as a mentor to me. He was a pastor. He was my pastor that was mentoring me. Said this: when there are certain questions that come up and somebody says, "I need an answer now," and if they're not going to give you time to think about it and go to the Lord in prayer, the answer is no. In other words, if you need an answer now, I'll give you the answer now. The answer is no. And it's right along the lines of being patient so that we don't have to take these false hopes. And then next week, or our next passage is going to be how he speaks of the Christian's response of prayer. So it goes back to what I was saying, that wait a minute, I'm going to take time and think about this. And also, wait a minute, I'm going to take time and pray about this. So it's kind of the two bookends around this dilemma of, well, what do we do when we're stressed out and we have to give an answer right away? We don't have to give an answer. Like I said, if shots are fired, you got to duck. But when you have an opportunity to think about it and to pray about it, you better do that, because everything has to be put in according to what God wants you to do. And if there's a shot fired, he wants to preserve life. And so you should duck. But the point is there might be emergency situations that you have to respond to, hopefully in a godly manner, and other situations that you can have a little bit more time in, and you just need to slow down and be patient and pray, as we will see more of next week. With this, then, even Christians can be tempted to swear evil oaths, but shouldn't. These oaths deceitfully promise a quick relief with a, yeah, whatever you say, just make this happen. Make this uncomfortable situation go away. Yeah. It's a deceitful promise because it's going to bite you later. It's going to bite you later when you do this. Instead, it doesn't really make the evil, scary, uncomfortable situation go away. It's really a trap, and we know that. Verse 12b then says, so that you may not fall under judgment. So this warning about judgment is for those who say yes and no and are inaccurate, in other words, lying, and for those also who got themselves into some ridiculous vow that they now have to keep or they'll be judged. In other words, you made the promise, you need to keep it. Okay, if you made the promise and now you regret it, if it's a promise that you need to keep, you need to keep it, or you're going to be judged for lying. Also, for those who take the Lord's name in vain by taking oaths saying, I swear to God. You've got to be careful with that. The ones that characteristically and consistently live according to false oaths show that they're really not Christians. It goes back with everything that James has been teaching us, is that Christians are going to mess up, but those that continuously and characteristically violate these things James is teaching, they're demonstrating that they're not really Christians. And they will be judged. And with this is the important thing that Christians really need to understand is God has a high priority against lying and falsehood and liars. In Revelation 21:8, and also verse 27, also 22:15, God names liars among the most heinous of sinners. He names them. Listen to this, verse Revelation 22:15. They will not be in the kingdom, these liars. This is what it says. Outside are the dogs and the sorcerers and the immoral persons and the murderers and the adulterers and the idolaters and everyone who loves and practices lying. And we think about that as like lying is just such a little sin compared to murder, but it's put in these verses right alongside with murderers. God hates this. We are to use our mouths for the glory of God, as James has been pointing out in his whole epistle. James 2:12, we talked about that. James 3:2. So we see then that this passage shows us two types of promises that will then help you to speak as a Christian should and avoid judgment. The polluted promises and the plain promises. And in today's society, it's hard to get honesty from anyone. We know that. We desire the bottom line, but we have to go through all the disclaimers to find the bottom line. Just give me the bottom line. And there are so many loopholes that it's almost as if we need to have an attorney with us when we sign up for a cell phone commitment. Because there's all these loopholes of this company is offering you this deal, or they're making a promise that if you do this, I'll do this. But then to find the deal, you have to dig through because we can't trust anybody. Because mankind is depraved. Romans 3:10 and 23, there's none righteous, not even one, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Mankind is so evil that we can't trust anybody. We can't trust anybody. Making vows, promises, or oaths is an attempt of some kind of enforcement, yet really, at the bottom line with these vows, they have become mocked, mundane, and dishonored. All the vows, have you ever heard of a wedding vow? Have you ever heard of these other vows, these commitments that people make and just treat them with a wink, wink? Or, didn't you notice I had my fingers crossed behind my back? Vows and oaths are viewed as just trash in our society, as an attempt to put duct tape on something to try to fix it. But we as Christians we don't need to dabble in that. It shouldn't be this way in the church. Christians are to be honest with one another, and therefore we should be able to trust each other. That's what James is saying. We should be able to trust each other. Colossians 3:9. Do not lie to one another, since you laid aside the old self, which is evil practices, and have put on the new self, who is being renewed to a true knowledge according to the image of the one who created him. Ephesians 4:25. Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth, each one of you with his neighbor, for we are all members of one another. Just say it. Just tell it like it is. Peter's frantic oath of denying Christ serves as a sobering reminder of considering what we are doing in making a vow, promise, or oath. It's like we need to consider this. Peter gives us a perfect example of, oh man. But we've all messed up in this area, I would have to conclude, one way or another, in one of these types of oaths. Thankfully, there is forgiveness. Thankfully, there is forgiveness. We look at Peter, and what's so nice about Peter is he took the brunt of our failures and just put them on display, and they all kind of fell on him, and we viewed how the Lord viewed him in doing these things, but we see that there's hope. Jesus still considered Peter a disciple. Mark 16:6. After all the apostles had scattered, the women found that the tomb was empty. The angel told the women, go back and tell the disciples and Peter where to meet me. We're going to do some follow-up business here. They are still my children, even Peter. Wow. Jesus still then confirmed Peter as an apostle/shepherd. John 21:15 to 17. He still told Peter to feed my sheep. He considered him a leader still, even after he failed. There's hope for us. We look at Paul. The Apostle Paul had vowed according to his language, but his vow was according to the context of how he describes how he was saved, that his mission in life, is according to what he believed, was to, and he'd gotten papers from the Jews in Jerusalem to back him up of his commitment to slaughter Christians and the Christian faith. But yet that was an evil vow, and we see that he disregarded that evil vow and became a leader in the church. So there's hope for all of us. We look at what Peter did, and we look at what Jesus did with that. We look what Paul did, and we look what Jesus did with that. there's hope for us. We can press on. We have the opportunity to move ahead with this, but we need to remember these things and take them seriously. Let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father,